As Jeroen said, I was asked by the organizers to say something about the future of open science. But indeed, as a historian by background, I have a somewhat complicated relationship with, somewhat complicated relationship with the future. I'm very comfortable with explaining where we are based on the steps that we have taken, but looking into the future is a little bit more difficult for me. But I will try to take out my crystal ball and take you along in some of the more recent trends and developments later on in my talk that I think are important for open science. And maybe also something else at the start of my talk. When I was invited for this presentation, that was already 2 months ago, the world looked quite differently. So actually I had been discussing with my team that we would prepare a presentation today about the enormous progress that we had made with open science in the Netherlands and also globally. But suddenly, also in the past few weeks, of course, the world is looking very differently, mainly because of the developments in the US. We'll try not to end too pessimistically, but I think these are important developments that we should try to reflect on, and that will have their effects on also on the open science movement. So I've divided my talk, into 3 parts. Like Sander before, I also want to reflect a little bit on the question what we are actually talking about when we're talking about open science, and I will explain why I think that's important. And then I also, because I'm proud of what we have been doing at the Open Science NL program, I also want to explain a little bit what we are doing there to promote open science in the Netherlands, and then, as promised, a few current trends and developments. But first, the question, what are we talking about when we are talking about open science? The reason why I want to briefly reflect on the question is because when attending the kind of conferences that we have today, or also other meetings, we often assume that we are talking about the same thing when using the term open science. But along the way, very often it appears that, well, we have slightly different views on what is important or why we do open science actually. Well, people that know me know that I often use this picture to make that point. Actually, this picture is already a little bit old. It's from 2013, and it's coming from a chapter that's called Open Science, 1 Term, 5 Schools of Thought. And it's based on a review of a very large collection of papers. And basically what the authors do here, they distinguish under the broad umbrella of open science 5 schools of thought. So they, what they argue is that a lot of people are working within the open science movement, but you can distinguish between schools that have slightly different agendas. Often they overlap, but still slightly different assumptions or assumptions on what actually is currently wrong in the science system and should be repaired. So I'm not going to deal with all the different schools here, but just as an example, so the democratic school is mainly preoccupied with the big issue of the inequality of the access of research in the world, and are therefore dealing with issues like open access, open data, etc. Related, but still different, is, for instance, the public school that is mainly preoccupied with the idea that society should be much more involved with science, should have access to knowledge, or should even be involved in research. And then you're, of course, are talking about things like citizen science, public engagement, those kinds of activities. Really different, I would say, is the measurement school of thought within open science. That is mainly very much concerned with the way how research is currently being assessed and is striving for the modernization of research assessment reform, so to say. So a lot of what I think we currently call recognition and rewards sits in this space, I would say. As I said, this is already a somewhat old picture, and it would actually be nice to do this exercise again now, 10 years later, with a lot of more initiatives and literature available. But I think the message still holds, and that is that open science is a very broad church. A lot of people that work within that movement, but do have slightly different agendas, different backgrounds, and different things that they think are important to change in the research system. And in my view, that's absolutely no problem at all. I think all the schools that are presented here have equally valid agendas, but it's good to be aware of it, also for the kinds of discussions that we have today. Another Venn diagram, which shows, I think, in a useful way how open science also is related to that other important topic that is dealt with here and in the Reels Center. Actually, I think a few of the authors come from the VU University that have produced this. Very useful picture. I think that also shows that that research integrity theme overlaps with things that are being done within the open science movement, but are also separate. Yet another Venn diagram. Zoom out a little bit. This is produced by Stephen Curry, who is the former chair of the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment. And what he wanted to show here is how open science, or in this case open scholarship, relates with the research assessment reform initiated with DORA, but also the equity and diversity agenda. Have three broad topics with their own foci, of course, but he nicely illustrates that with the arrows, a center of gravity that is also very much around people and values and around the important topic of research culture. This Venn diagram inspired me in my place to to make this far too complicated picture. I did that when we were drafting the current NWO strategy. Sadly, it didn't make the final version of the strategy. But here I tried to picture how open science recognition and rewards, the equity, diversity, and inclusion, and research agendas, how they interrelate with each other, how they overlap, and how they together are very important to produce what is kept in the NWO NWO strategy as one of the 4 building blocks: a healthy research culture. But back to open science and what we as Open Science NL program are doing about that. We were launched almost 2 years ago in March 2023. And officially we are called a regieorgaan, which cannot be translated into English. I'm sorry. So we were part of the Dutch Research Council, NWO, and we have been set up on the special request of then Minister Robert Dijkgraaf, who, as you know, made substantial investments in research in 2022, but also especially for the topic of open science. 20 million a year for a program of 10 years until 2031.